welcome to this week's Property Matters, a show that brings global trends to an Irish audience to help shape your knowledge of the industry. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host today is myself, Brian Fox, and Carol Tallon. We have an exciting lineup today. First, we talk about the role of the community in shaping their local areas, and we'll learn about the SCSI, Ireland Sustainability Initiative for Property and Construction. Dún Laoghaire County Council is planning to issue guidelines which are aimed at increasing the number of large apartments in the county. The proposal has come up against massive opposition from the construction industry, saying that institutional investment would be damaged at a crucial time. On the line now is Councillor Maeve O'Connell, Fine Gael, representing the Stillorgan area on Dún Laoghaire County Council. So Maeve, do you go along with what some builders and estate agents are saying about the council's guidelines?
No, I don't. I think you have to look at the specific needs and demands within Dún Laoghaire. And if you consider my own area, Marion, Leopardstown, Stillorgan, there's a huge demand for people to trade down. So people are rattling around in large houses, families have moved out, and they keep looking at all these new developments, and there isn't anything suitable. And the feedback I'm getting from them is there's not enough bedrooms and there's not enough storage. So this will address that demand, which is there, and give people the opportunity to trade down and thus release more property into the market. The second thing that is also in demand is we want to grow communities. And providing more developments with 1 bed and 2 bed and 3 bed means that you can start in a 1 bed, move to a 2 and move to a 3 as your life cycle changes. And that means you stay within the community in the longer term, which creates more stability for you as an individual, but builds wider communities, and that's better for all of us.
So, Maeve, they're saying, they being the construction industry, that it's going to damage institutional investment. Did you go along with that argument?
I don't think so, because I think they will recognise that the demand is there, and they may not have considered these wider demands. When we're just looking, most of the demand that they are addressing is new entrants into the marketplace. What I'm trying to highlight is that we have people out there who want to buy that aren't really fully engaged, because to date there has been nothing there for them to buy. So I don't think they fully reflect as that demand is there.
Yeah, but it seems to centre around Cherrywood, where there are 40% of the new units in big apartment blocks in new communities such as are undeveloped, according to in the council area. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, again, Cherrywood is at a very early stage. And that is very much an area where you are trying to build long-term communities. So I think that is something that will resolve itself over time as you get people moving in initially and then they trade up as their life stages change. And again, that they can trade down as their life stages change, because that's our big issue that we have, particularly in the Stillorgan ward, where there isn't somewhere for people to trade down to, something just a little bit smaller, but that has the storage space.
So would this have the backing then of councillors? These new guidelines that that council are proposing to bring out?
Well, certainly from my view in the Stillorgan ward, I certainly think we do need more of these, more storage space and more of the 3 bed units.
So where do you think? I mean, will there be a clash then? Will there be collision then between yourselves and the construction industry? I mean, when I say the construction industry, builders and estate agents, in relation to this?
Well, I think we'll certainly have a robust discussion on it. And the other factor that needs to be taken in, which again, when they would have done their initial plans around future developments, they would take into account is the whole working from home phenomena, which is something that's here to stay. And people need more space to work from home. So I think there will be more of a demand for those slightly larger units, not from everybody. And this is the point. It's just increasing the number of units. There'll still be plenty of 1 and 2 bed, but we do need more of those larger units, as I said, for trading down, for people to move through the various life stages and to facilitate people to work from home.
Yeah, and I see one developer wants exemptions from the 40%, which is applied to schemes of more than 50 apartments. So, do you think will they get their way? Do you think in relation to it?
I think all of these things will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. As I said, it depends where you are. As I said, in the Stillorgan, the Marion, Leopardstown, Stillorgan area, what we need is those 3 beds with more storage space. You know, they don't need to be all of them, but we do need more of them. But in other areas of the county, and particularly once you get closer to the city, I can certainly see why the smaller units might be more suitable. So I think it'll have to be in a case-by-case, location-by-location assessment.
Can I ask you your thoughts too on the projects that are going ahead in the Dún Laoghaire Rathdown County Council area? For instance, there's one in Booterstown that has been that got a lot of local objections, but have since been passed by An Bord Pleanála. There's one in Clonkeen College and a number of others around. What are your thoughts on those planning permissions that were locally objected to, but An Bord Pleanála said we're going to go ahead?
I think this has been one of the huge issues with the SHD process, which is now being changed, is that it was very difficult for local residents to feel that their voices were heard. And there's been an increasing number of judicial review applications because residents feel that their voices weren't being heard and weren't being listened to by An Bord Pleanála. And I think that has been one of the difficulties with the SHD process.
That's the strategic housing development.
Yeah, it's coming to an end now, and there'll be a new process coming into place, and it'll be interesting to see if that has helped address some of these concerns, valid concerns that local communities have, that their voices just aren't being heard.
And what do you think that will be?
We'll have to wait and see.
But I just want to, before we wrap this up, I mean, there's that charge of NIMBYism and not in my backyard sort of thing. And I mean, if An Bord Pleanála was not there in the first place, we know there's a chronic shortage of reasonably priced housing in the area. I mean, what can be done to prevent the local objections going ahead in the situation that we're in at the moment?
I think we need to look at the broader picture of what's actually happening and stopping building taking place. Even developments that have gotten An Bord Pleanála permission and there hasn't been a judicial review application haven't turned the sod. Yeah. And frequently they've come back and they have increased the density of the development. So they've gotten the planning permission and then they've come back again. So there's bigger issues. The delays in construction, I think, have very little to do with local objections. And I think the SHD process has demonstrated that, is that we sped up the planning, people were getting the planning permissions, and then nothing was happening. So what it's actually highlighted is that planning hasn't been the delay at all. And by disenfranchising and taking away the voice of local people who've actually just upset our own taxpayers and our own citizens and our own communities without actually addressing the housing crisis anyway. So there's wider issues which I wouldn't claim to be an expert.
But I mean,
the developments aren't, the buildings that get permission aren't being built at the rate that it was expected would happen with the fast track planning process. So I think that's something that needs to be investigated by experts and addressed.
Yeah, but I dare say the fast track planning too would have problems with local residents as well, would they not? Well,
that's what I'm pointing out. The fast track planning process, even when people were granted planning, they still didn't turn the sod. And there was delays. And like one estimate is about 40% of things that were granted planning permission hadn't started construction within 18 months. So I think that's quite stark. So that shows that there's issues. And we know what some of the issues are. We know that it's trying to get construction workers. There is challenges around getting funding models and things like that. But I think it's very important that we don't point the fingers at local residents who care about their communities as causing these delays. They're actually not the ones causing the delays.
Would you think there's a similar problems in other local authorities around the country as Dún Laoghaire are experiencing at the moment?
I think Dún Laoghaire is possibly experiencing more of them. There's a lot more applications that have come into Dún Laoghaire for these large-scale developments than in most other areas. So thus we would have a concentration then of the ensuing issues associated with that.
Okay, yeah. Very interesting. So just what you don't take now that we're starting a new year, what you don't take in relation to residential construction in the county over the next year or two?
Well, I was reading the survey in the published in the Irish Times at the weekend, which said that something like 81% of Irish people thought property prices were going to come down in the next year. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe it will. Certainly, there's a huge amount of things being built. There's construction taking place everywhere. So there will certainly be a lot more coming on stream in the next 12 months. So hopefully that will address a lot of the issues. And of course, we have the county development plan going through at the moment, which will hopefully address some of those other issues by allowing increased supply in certain areas.
Councillor Maeve O'Connell, Fine Gael, representing Stillorgan area and Dún Laoghaire Down County Council. Thanks so much indeed.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Talon, and Brian Fox. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Up next, we're joined by John Shannon, Associate Director of Offices at Cushman and Wakefield. And John is also a member of the Sustainability Working Group within the SCSI. John, you're very welcome. Happy New Year to you.
And Happy New Year to you too. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Before we started recording, I mentioned to you that this month marks our 4th year recording Property Matters on iProperty Radio, which is great. But it was also pointed out to me that it also marks the 3rd year of COVID, which feels like less of a milestone to be celebrating. So before we get into the sustainability initiatives of the SCSI, which is really what we want to concentrate on today, I can't let your presence here go without asking you. You are the tenant rep within offices at Cushman and Wakefield. How are your clients finding things at the moment? Again, we're heading into our 3rd year of COVID.
It's very interesting times. It's as always, it's a funny old market. It's an interesting market. Last year was very much, a year of two halves. We had about 5 months of lockdown. We would have noticed from talking to our clients, business started picking up in a significant way, probably from about August, and we had very strong figures in terms of deals signed in the last quarter of the year. So the stats are effectively being finalised. We're seeing all the reports coming out. It's looking like it's about 1.5 million square feet for the year, which is broadly in line with the 10-year average. So given where we were this time last year, it's about as positive as it could have been.
Okay, well, look, that's a good note to start on. I know we will be speaking to some of your colleagues later on in the month. So I mentioned there that you're on the sustainability panel of the SCSI, the Chartered Surveyors in Ireland. And I mean, in terms of sustainability, we know that, the main transformative drivers of real estate, not just in Ireland, but globally right now are decarbonisation and digitalisation. So both of those feed into the drive towards sustainability. So you might just talk us through some of the headline initiatives that the SCSI has ongoing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Sustainability Working Group was set up. One of the main driving forces, our chairperson Eloise, and a few others came together and said that we felt that as a profession we needed to be doing more. Real estate contributes to about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions through its construction, and uses about 40% of global energy in terms of how it's being run. So it's a significant contributor and something that anyone involved in the sector, needs to be more aware of. I suppose within the group, our main goals and what we want to achieve as a panel would be to promote awareness, to increase education of sustainability in the built environment, but also we would have a goal of working towards a carbon neutral built environment by 2050. And it's through organising CPDs, undertaking initiatives such as the Surveyors declaring a climate emergency, and educating our members and contributing towards government policy in as much as we can that we hope to achieve those goals.
And they're all laudable goals. In terms of our working towards carbon neutrality, how much of this is likely to be offset? I mean, and by that I mean, obviously there are huge initiatives to reduce carbon across buildings and in terms of not just the operation and performance of buildings, but also in terms of construction materials. And we'll get into that throughout the conversation. But the expectation that the industry is going to have to do a lot to offset carbon.
Absolutely. And I mean, the technologies are changing all the time. So we're getting better at building buildings. But I think it's not just, this wish, this aspirational goal. The Climate Action Bill has been signed into law. So this is happening whether we like it or not. And I mean, you look at our standing stock and the buildings that are available. I think the figures for our housing stock is that the government wants to retrofit approximately 500,000 homes by 2030. I think we did about 4,000 last year. So there's a huge amount of work to be done on it. And similarly with commercial properties, I think their target is about 50,000 buildings by 2030. So, it's not aspirational. It has to happen, and it is happening.
I love that. You almost say that with an air of defiance. This isn't a wish, this is law. And yeah. I mentioned at the start that you actually work as the tenant rep. So this is where we ask the law, has that translated into acceptance by your clients? I mean, is the industry ready for this?
I think the industry is ready. I mean, along with other sectors in the economy, there's obviously certain labour shortages at the moment. I think, the area that I work in is in offices. I work up in Dublin. I tend to deal with a lot of multinational companies and large occupiers. What I have found is that the buildings that they're going for, they are sustainable buildings. Like any of the new offices that are being built in Dublin, they're certified, they're modern, they're well built, and they're well run. And they could stand, toe to toe with buildings being built anywhere in the world. So, that sector of the property market has definitely embraced it. ESG over the last number of years has become increasingly more important. This is what occupiers wanted. Landlords have responded. And now you've got investors in a big way looking at their portfolios and what buildings are sustainable and what buildings aren't sustainable. So I think, the office sector is one which, has already embraced it and is already seeing the fruits of all of the work that's gone into it. The other sector is probably a little bit slower to catch up and not without their challenges, but no doubt they will get there. Retail, for example, industrial, but there are developers in Dublin who are building certified buildings like I put out towards the airport, where they're getting LEED certification on industrial buildings, which you wouldn't have imagined would be something that sector would care about, but there is a market there for it.
You bring up something really interesting there. I mean, you mentioned there that one of the goals of the SCSI is around awareness and education, but something interesting here is that a lot of the even before the latest legislation, we had the industry demanding higher standards, particularly FDI clients, particularly large tech multinationals. So is it a case that, the industry or that essentially the market was driving this?
I think so.
The industry was offering it?
I think so. I mean, I think any organization will look at its real estate as a reflection of itself, of its brand, of its culture. They want to occupy the best buildings in the best locations in order to attract talent and to attract people who align with those brands and align with that culture. I suppose up until about 5 years ago, the main driver of commercial real estate was cost. And then that flipped and it became talent, and it was all about talent attraction and talent retention. And the real estate aspect of a company would play a significant role in that. And at that point, you had occupiers who were looking at buildings, who wanted the best buildings, who wanted the best performing buildings. And that's when developers started to, understand that's where the market was going. We need to start providing that product so that, we can let our buildings quicker and move on to the next one.
I've never heard it articulated like that, but that's so powerful that any sector would actually look to its real estate, and that's how it is being represented.
Well, it's one of the many ways they would do it. It's part of the bigger picture, but it's an important one because it's a physical, thing that people can walk up and see. It's not we are brave or we're going to do the best that we can. It's a physical representation of what they are as a business.
That's very powerful. Honestly, John, I've never heard it articulated like that, but it makes so much sense. And we can see that change happening. So then in terms of the education goal of the SCSI, is that more about educating the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's about educating our members, but anyone who's interested in it, the information is there. It's freely available, and it's about us as a group of surveyors. Like the people working on the panel will be split across all sectors. So we have valuers, we have agents, we've got property managers, we've got building surveyors. I think we even have, or we do even have a barrister who's also a chartered surveyor, and it's about leveraging their experience and their contacts to try and get as much of the information, because sustainability is an incredibly broad subject. You know what I mean? It's with a lot of practitioners and a lot of members, it's where do you even start with it? So it's trying to identify where there are information gaps and knowledge gaps, and then get people who can step in and help out with those. And through organising CPDs, through preparing papers, through writing articles for the Surveyors Journal and the Irish Times and the national press, promoting the idea and getting people talking, we're hoping that will start to drive it forward. But I mean, even the figures that I mentioned at the top, it's a huge scope for new business in terms of retrofitting buildings just alone. There's such a huge job to do. So we definitely would be encouraging members to look into that and how they could use it to drive their business.
Retrofitting is an interesting one. There's an interesting narrative playing out in the media at the moment, where on one side you have the cost of retrofit being seen almost as an argument against it. On the other side of it, we know in terms of sustainability that the most sustainable building is one that's already been built. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there. And you've mentioned there that the range of members of SCSI, you're ranging from all of the different professions you mentioned, right down, to small agents dotted right around regional areas and in market towns all over Ireland, but also kind of the agencies in Dublin that are dealing with these market-leading FDI companies and tech. How do the same rules apply to all?
No, I don't think the same rules apply to all. It's a fair comment. I think that, again, because it's so new to us and it's something that our members are only getting involved in, we have to try and disseminate the knowledge in a way that everyone can get something from it. But, you're not going to be having the same conversation as a valuer who's valuing a 100,000 square foot office building in Dublin versus someone who is valuing, a small shop in the Midlands, and that's not what it's about. But some of the questions that they're asking about, asking their clients about the buildings are the same, and it is transferable, and it's trying to bridge that gap and make sure that, whether they're working in the Midlands or working in Dublin, that they are asking their clients for the information and that they are valuing, in that example, with sustainability in mind.
Okay, well, let's talk about the valuations, because, one of the things we covered on the show here towards the end of 2021 was, the likely impact of COVID and how that would reflect in post-COVID valuations. But in terms of sustainability, there's a much broader range of things that would feed into the valuation. So can you talk us through some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually recently prepared it wouldn't be a guidance note, but it would be a kind of a white paper on, a list of items that should be considered by valuers when they're looking at real estate. And funnily enough, just at the start of January, the RICS have recently updated their guidance note on including sustainability in valuations. And I do know that we're working on a number of CPDs on that, together with a couple of half-day sittings as well. And that actually even is more than a guidance note. It actually changes the red book in terms of how valuations are to be approached in terms of sustainability. So there's quite a bit of work is going into that. But in terms of what we've done here locally, you would be considering things like the age and the specification of the building. Does it have a rating? I mean, all buildings will have a BER rating or are capable of getting them, but perhaps it's got a LEED rating or NZEB or something like that. What on-site renewable energy is there? Is there solar panels? Is there LED lighting? Is there a very efficient air handling units, that sort of thing? Or you might be considering, is there any biodiversity features or any other sustainable features such as wastewater handling or rainwater collection? But as part of this, the valuer would also have to consider the tenant, how they occupy the property. Are they running it as sustainably as they can? Are there any green clauses in the leases? When they're on their inspection, they're looking for things like the quality of natural light, air quality, individual temperature controls and noise reductions, all that sort of stuff. Is there showers? Is there bike spaces? Are people encouraged to cycle to work rather than driving in a private car? And then, I suppose one of the most important aspects of it is, what sort of data is being captured? Is the landlord or is the tenant recording how much energy is being used on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis? And are they proactively looking to, reduce that and actually get more out of the building? If you can measure it, you can improve it. And I think, that capturing that data is probably one of the most important things that you can do to start improving your building and whether it's being run in a sustainable way. And then I suppose another thing valuers would also have to consider would be, do the sustainability credentials of an asset or the lack thereof have any impact on, who would be there to buy the property? So if an investment fund is looking at a building, would the lack of sustainable credentials mean that they were precluded from actually bidding on it? So I think that's some of the things that we would have looked at when we were trying to advise valuers. Certainly not an exhaustive list, but a good place to start in terms of when you're looking to build in sustainability into evaluation. And I mean, it's worth noting that, this isn't a new thing. Valuers have been doing this for, the last 10 years or so, but we're just looking to try and give it, more of a framework and a bit more regularity about it.
There's so much in what you've covered there. So we might just kind of strip back to a couple of points that are particularly relevant at the moment. So, for example, you talk about certifications, but to my mind, as almost a lay person, it seems like there's been this huge growth in the number of different types of certifications. So obviously you mentioned BER, and that's different. It has statutory standing, but in terms of other say wellness standards or other building standards. I mean, you mentioned at the top of the interview, and I think it's quite a powerful statement, we're getting better at building buildings. And that's a really good point. And these certifications are how we measure that we're getting better at building. But is there a hierarchy here? There's so many certifications. Are some more important than others?
I don't think so. I mean, in Dublin, particularly, say, in the office market, a lot of the office buildings are LEED certified. So that's leaderships in energy efficiency and design. That is an American standard, but it's one that can be applied to lots of different building types, not just offices, but it's been very popular in office in Dublin, probably due to our exposure to the American market. So we're dealing with a lot of American occupiers. They want to see their certification on the building for like with like comparison. In the UK, you've got BREEAM, which again, it's effectively the same thing. They have different names for the different levels, whether it's very good or platinum. But it's still certifying that the building is built in a sustainable way and can be operated in a sustainable way. You've also got other certifications that investors are probably more concerned with, such as GRESB, which would look at how the portfolio is being run. And then you've got one that you mentioned, which is WELL certification, which is much more concerned with occupiers' health and well-being. Because I suppose sustainability isn't just about the building, it's also about the occupants' health and well-being, making sure that they have a safe, healthy environment that's conducive to doing good work and being comfortable, and that's probably an important part of it that gets overlooked a little bit as well.
Yeah, you touched on something very important there in terms of I don't want to use the term brand recognition with certifications, but there is an element of that. But you mentioned earlier on the interview that portfolio managers and indeed their funders have been very aware of ESG. It's been a huge driver. ESG investing has been a huge driver over the last number of years, predating COVID, obviously. And there's something that maybe has changed in the last 2 years that you touched on. Without some of these certifications, funding might not actually be possible. How is that something that we are already seeing in the market, or is it something that is likely to come down the track?
I think it's likely to come down the track, but it all comes back to pricing as well, because, like developers, they're not, investors, they're not afraid of taking on these buildings and bringing them up to a modern standard. We've seen that time and time again in Dublin. But I think it's only if they can get them for the right price that it makes sense to go and do those upgrades, and that they're going to see it at the other side of it. So I do think that, it will, by not being sustainable, you are going to inherently limit your market, and it's going to impact on pricing, because having a building just sitting there without proactively being managed, without being brought up to a modern standard, just won't do in this market.
There's a proposed bill at the moment, the workplace ventilation bill. Is that likely to impact on valuations, or is this something that has really already been accounted for under other certifications?
It would probably depend on a case-by-case basis in terms of how that's being applied and whether it applies to the specific building. So I think, it'll factor into each individual valuer's assessment of any property they're looking at.
Okay, you touched on it earlier. I'd love to get into maybe further detail about the data. Obviously we work a lot with prop tech startups and providers in Ireland, and a lot of the work that they do is around gathering the data that's needed in order to use these insights, or for portfolio managers to be able to use these insights. But in terms of the data, do we have a clear set of guidelines on, say, for example, we're talking about the fabric of a building, but how a tenant occupies a building has a huge impact on energy performance. So actually, if that's going to impact on the value of a company, then does this add a responsibility onto the tenant to occupy the building in a more efficient way?
Yeah, but by use of the word efficiency, we're also building in cost reduction into that. That's part of it. So if you're going to put in efficient LED lights, there'll be a more expensive upfront cost, but they'll be cheaper to run, and that's of benefit to the occupier. I think there's probably a couple of things in what you're asking there, and all of this is governed by the relationship between the landlord and the tenant as set out in the lease. So it's everything that's negotiated at the start in terms of what are the parameters for how you're allowed to occupy the building. So you would have various clauses that we would refer to as green clauses. So, for example, data sharing would be a big one, where a landlord or an asset manager wants to know which floors are running at optimal levels and which aren't, so that if they're not performing, they can be improved. And if they're all working in unison, then overall he's got a better product, and you can work to improve the energy efficiency of the building. You'd also have things like waste management plan for the building. And then in terms of like a tenant's fit out, again, you come back to the rating. A lot of times what you'll see in leases is that the tenant is not allowed to do anything that would impact on the landlord's rating. So this could be, if they were doing their fit out, it would have to be their Cat B fit out. It would have to be in line with LEED Gold standards. They might not have to go and get it certified, but it would have to be done up to that level so that the landlord can retain his certification. And then, as I mentioned, as the occupiers are going through the life of their lease, it's for both parties, it's of benefit to be occupying it in the most efficient way possible, to be getting the best out of it.
Okay, and that's a fair assessment. In terms of real estate data, one of the things we've seen over the past 4 and 5 years is that there's a huge gap between those that are embracing, measuring and using it for actionable insights and those who aren't. So we know the gap is wide, but in terms of large occupiers, where are they in terms of their use of data analytics across real estate?
Oh, no, they're absolutely embedded with it. A lot of the very big occupiers like Facebook, like Salesforce, they have already declared, I think Salesforce is a net zero carbon company. Facebook have given undertakings to reduce their water consumption to next to nothing. I mean, it's, they've made these incredible pledges, and they do occupy buildings in very sustainable ways. I think what we're seeing is, better use of the technology. So you're seeing a lot more people employing smart meters, so you can get up-to-date readings on how much water you used that day, almost to a half an hour, how much electricity you used that day. And then companies, there's a company I came across recently called Ziggytech, and they have this whole platform which is developed and will actually spit out your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, so that if you're a large organization that has signed up for for that particular certification, you'll be able to measure it, quantify it, seek to improve it, and then move on from there. So loads of really exciting things going on in terms of what technology can do to improve that.
Excellent. That's from the perspective of PropTech Ireland, and for all of the innovators who are there trying to create positive change. That's a really good starting point for 2022. So I'm really happy to hear that. So, I mean, look, we've gone through, in terms of the guidance document, the factors that are likely to impact on valuations. But you mentioned there that the risk document just came through. Now, is it fair to say that that's likely where the Irish sector will be looking next?
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. So we're governed by RICS and SCSI. They work in tandem, hand in hand. So that document is live from the 31st of January. It's available to download at the moment. As I said, the working group is going through it at the moment. We're looking to build out a selection of CPDs. There'll probably be a couple of half-day seminars, because this document goes beyond a normal guidance note. It's not just best practice. This is also changing what's in the Red Book. So it would be of particular importance to pay attention to what's going on in it, and to be reflecting that in valuation reports for them to be compliant with the Red Book.
So is there anything that we need to be aware of now, maybe from where the guidance document that was issued several months ago to what's likely to be coming down the track in the next 12 to 24 months?
There's quite a lot in it, and I think you're probably better off holding off until we have our CPDs ready to go.
Very good. And by the way, in terms of the SCSI CPDs coming up, you've mentioned a few of them there. Specifically, what's kind of on the agenda for the next 2 quarters? I have to double check what's in my diary. I don't know it off the top of my head. We have a huge plan for this year. There's an awful lot going on. I mean, just closing out last year, we ran CPDs on the recent changes in legislation. We ran them from building surveyors' perspective, how they should be looking at sustainability. We looked at electric car charging. With sustainability and real estate, you can literally go anywhere. So we've a full program of events planned. They're all available on the SCSI website for in the members section. Great, thank you. And you mentioned Surveyors Declare.
Yeah.
You might just explain how that works.
Yeah, so this was one of our earlier initiatives, and it's actually, there's been various sectors of real estate globally that have come up with this Surveyors Declare document. There's also an architect's one, there's an engineer's one, and essentially what it is it's a framework that our members and our member firms sign up to, so that they will be running their businesses in a more sustainable way. So we'll be looking at reducing the use of fossil fuels within your practice, or even, in your how you live in your private time. You would also be looking at reducing water, increasing biodiversity, and generally looking at your surveying activities and how they can be done in a more efficient way. So we drafted up the document, we sent it out, we had huge engagement from our members. There was a really positive take up from it. Our next step is we're going to be calling everyone who's signed up for it and ask them, so you've signed up for this, what have you done? How have you impacted? And for example, in where I work in Cushman and Wakefield, we've made sure we switched all of our power suppliers to 100% renewable energy. We've brought in live plants, desk plants into the office. People have got aloe vera plants and other things like that. We've also increased, we're looking at replacing any of the old light fittings with new modern LED ones. That work is underway at the moment. We're looking at potentially getting beehives. Anything that we can do to try and improve the efficiency of our building. So that's the answer we'll be given, but we'll be continuing the work with that, because it does get a positive reaction.
Apart from getting a positive reaction, you're making it very personal then for the professionals involved to essentially turn up and do their best. And that therefore will translate into the industry, which is what we want to see. It's not just a case of making these available to our clients. There's a personal role to be played here as well. You touched on it at the start of the interview there that, previously cost might have been an impediment. I'm interested to know, where are the points of resistance to the sustainability initiatives? That's a very broad question, I appreciate. But, where are the points of resistance coming up now?
We're not seeing a huge amount of resistance to it. There's been several changes, both in terms of how the market operates, who's in the market. As I mentioned, very much occupier-led, but developers and landlords have responded to that need. And like I said, we're now building better buildings.
It's a very broad question, because really, I suppose I'm thinking from when we started to introduce ESG initiatives, going back, when they were called CSR initiatives, what we found was that the point of resistance was nearly always cost. And what we found as well, that even where the climate benefits were clear, there was never that sense of urgency. And that's something that really feels like it's changed. Are you seeing that? Seeing that at the moment? Like, is there a sense of urgency around the need to address climate impact as well as financial concerns?
Yeah, no, sorry, I lost. I remember what I was going to say there. I suppose the big change has been since March 2021, have been changes in the EU directives and EU taxonomy in terms of how businesses are recording ESG in their accounts. And that has been a major driver of it. People have to actually be accountable. It's not just greenwashing. And I found that, occupiers are very much wearing this like a badge of honor. And again, it comes back to, this is a representation of their culture. This is the type of firm that they are. And if you agree with these values, if you align with them, then you like to come and work with us. We're very similar people to you. And, it's very much being used as a talent attractor, as something to retain people, something that people can buy into as part of the culture of a business. So I would have said that, whereas previously, yes, absolutely, it was cost versus profit. Now I would say that ESG is on the same footing as profit. It's just as important that they meet these goals, for the wider benefits that are there to any business or organization.
Okay, but then what are the barriers that we're likely to face? Because we know that policy making is supporting this, but is that happening fast enough?
Yeah, no, I do believe it is. I think there is great momentum at the moment. Certainly in the last 12 months, I don't think you can turn on a television, you can't open a newspaper, you can't click open your LinkedIn feed without there being something about climate change or sustainability. And people are really buying into it and certainly adapting to the new world order.
What are the trends we can expect to see? I mean, by the way, I appreciate that we're still dealing with the ongoing impact of COVID. So it in a way, it's almost a welcome relief to concentrate and focus on something else. But in terms of, the next 2 to 3 years, what are the trends that you're starting to see and what do you expect to see?
I think there will be, probably increased responsibility on firms to maintain their reporting. What we'll see is improving building performance. So there's no point in just getting a certification at the start of its life. It will have to be improved. So we'll definitely see technology improving in terms of how those buildings are managed, how they're monitored, and then how they're occupied. So I think it'll just be an ever increasing curve of better and better buildings, and a lot of focus on retrofitting. And as you said yourself, the most sustainable building is one that's already built. The carbon is already embodied. So how do you make that the best version of itself that it can be without knocking it down and sending it to landfill? So certainly over the next 5 years, I think retrofitting will be a big area, particularly in the residential side.
It's really interesting to be having this conversation now when there's an ongoing debate about what the future of work is likely to look like, and hybrid. Because you're at the coalface there, what are your clients and the people you're dealing with, and indeed their teams and their communities? Are you getting a sense of the hybrid situation working, or what are you feeling about the future of work?
I think there's an undoubted demand for an office. People want a base. They want to be able to get out of their houses. I've been talking to some people I know who have been in their bedrooms for, as you said, the third anniversary of it. They're absolutely sick of it. They miss their morning commute. It's gotten that bad. I think there's a place for hybrid working. I think it's role specific. It's organization. It's not going to work for everyone. It's going to work really well for other people, like most things in life. So I think, we're probably still in the middle of what's going on. It's very difficult to call it one way or the other. But as evidence in terms of the take-up for last year, in line with the 10-year average, very strong second half of the year. Deals are still happening. We haven't seen a massive influx of second-hand space. And I think it's probably, going to be a case of occupiers just using their space differently rather than taking any less space. Are you going to have staff coming in 5 days a week? Probably not, but some weeks they might be, and some weeks they won't be in at all. And it's just about finding that balance and addressing how they're using their real estate to meet that flexible requirement.
These are certainly interesting times, and I appreciate your insights there. That was John Shannon, Associate Director of Offices at Cushman and Wakefield and a member of the Sustainability Working Group within the SCSI. And for details of any of the CPD courses mentioned by John there, I'd recommend anybody just go to the SCSI website for further information. That's it from us this week on Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on social media or by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio. My thanks to Luke Delaney and Peter Rice on sound. We'll be back at the same time next week. From myself and Brian Fox and all the team here, stay safe.